Hey guys, so I saw this video about Guild Wars 2 and it kind of interests me, so let's check it out.
Earlier this year, I decided I wanted to experience more of what Guild Wars 2 actually had to offer, professions included. 3 months into this one class a month challenge and Thief.
I totally get that. There is this weird thing that happens. So I've been playing Guild Wars 2 for a few months now, and I've gotten, decently far. I've done a lot of stuff in the game, but I've only played one class. And I often think about all the content that I haven't experienced because of the fact that I've only played one class. Recently, I've been seeing comments on older videos about people saying things like, oh, the human starting zone is the most boring, the quest line and all these other starting zones are more interesting, those kinds of things. I've also been seeing things about like this class does this thing, that class does that thing, these mechanics that are working in that are more interesting to play. And I do feel like a lot of times, especially running around as Reaper, just spamming spin for win moves and stuff like that, the game is sort of just not as complex as I remember it being when I first started, because I now know a lot of these mechanics. I understand what boons are, and I like know how to get my DPS up, and I know how to do all these things. So I'm really interested in seeing this video specifically, and because Thief is one of those classes that I want to play.
Was up next. My Thief was actually my second main character I ever had, though still only clocking in with 245 hours of gameplay after 12 years now. I've never really felt good at playing Thief since I came back to Guild Wars 2. So naturally, I took her into what most would consider the most painful expansion.
It does look really
So hopefully
intense.
by the end of the month,
Heart of Thorns.
Thief will
dude.
be second nature to me.
That was
if you're
fun.
joining me for the first time this month, the challenge is simple.
Dude, those
I'm playing only Thief
centuries
for all
or
of my
whatever
Guild Wars
you're
2
still
gaming,
gets
and
going.
I can't look up any builds. I have to build them from scratch myself. This month's goal, as you may have already guessed, finish as many Heart of Thorns open world achievements as possible.
Heck yeah, dude.
Now, I've played a decent amount of Thief compared to others, mostly on Core and Deadeye. So, wanting to start off
Deadeye's the one that I'm interested in.
I dared to play Daredevil first. I recently made the legendary staff Bifrost, so I fleshed out my gear with Celestial stats, set up my build, and got to work in the
Female
jungle.
human meta.
Now,
Always a
Verdant
play.
Brink has always been an interesting zone for me. On one hand, I actually understand the layout and can find my way in here. And on the other hand, my first memories are from the launch of
I find that such an interesting point of understanding the layout, being able to find your way. So much in Heart of Thorns does have that thing where it feels like I'm exploring it for the first time every single time I go there. After doing the Kalidbog quest line, there were a couple of places that I understood and knew. So when I was going through and hunting for all of my hero points in order to finish out my build for Reaper, there were a couple of hero points that I had a little bit of a hard time getting to, but then I thought back to when I was doing Kalidbog and remembered that there were areas that allowed me to get much further up. And once you realize that there's a lot of verticality going on and you have to sort of explore that way, that makes it that makes something click in that game very quickly, and especially with Heart of Thorns, which is a pain to get around in. I'm very excited to get to Path of Fire, but remembering that there's verticality in that game is something that you have to click into a lot in order to get around.
Heart of Thorns getting absolutely mauled to death by pocket raptors like a Keg and Holbrack, as tons of NPCs and players
Nah, those snipers, dude.
Screaming
Those
for balance
snipers are the
patches
thing.
and swinging their swords. Verdant Brink also had the most achievements that I could see left other than Dragon's Stand, so I figured that Daredevil would be up to the task. Right off rip, as I tackled meta event sequences, I realized
I love the
I was
metas.
a terrible thief. I had no idea what any of my steal skills were doing whenever I picked them up. I'm a
100%.
dreadfully addicted button masher, so I constantly spammed more of a skill than I wanted to, since
This is another thing that I've been queuing into recently, is the idea of actually understanding why you're pressing the button that you're pressing makes you such a better player in an MMO. And it's a thing that I've overlooked for so long. Whenever I play a DPS character, I'm usually looking for one thing, and that's brain dead button tapping. And you can do pretty well with that. There are some really good classes in MMOs that allow you to do that. Warlock is really good, especially Destruction Warlock is really good for letting you just like slam the button that's off cooldown and the one that's glowing and you get through it. Reaper in Necromancer Reaper is really good for just pressing your buttons that are off cooldown and doing tons and tons of damage. But I do feel like I'm missing out on something, and that's the connection to the game whenever I'm playing it. I recently started playing a tank. I started playing Protection Warrior in World of Warcraft, and that has really brought me to this understanding that when you're locked in, when you're thinking about all the skills that you're using, you're analyzing the situation that you're currently in, and you're not just seeing it as big group of enemy need die, and you're thinking about, what am I doing? I'm trying to manage this aggro. I have to keep these attacks up in order to keep that aggro high. That one's getting away. I have to taunt him to bring him back. Okay, now we're back on these. Okay, that just came off cooldown. That's a good AoE skill that's going to keep these guys interested in me. While that's interested in me, I can work on pulling a new group of enemies as well. This whole sort of thing that you do, this connection to the game that you're actually playing, instead of just trying to zone out and have the hours melt away, gives you a deeper sensation of fun, for sure.
Thief, it's all initiative based and not cooldown based, and I was used to having 11 billion health and survivability from the scrapper I had just got done using, so we'll get there or die trying, I guess. The good news is that despite being out of practice, Daredevil was exceptionally strong. 3 dodges that buff me, and regenerating endurance like nobody's business to keep dodging more often was a good start. The ability to blind enemies and reflect missiles with the Staff 4's Dust Strike, which I definitely made good use of.
Not at all.
I was definitely good at using that. And throw in an evade leap skill, shadow step to break stuns and get out of AoEs, and my always fun dagger storm to evade and pretend to be a axe-wielding warrior for a little bit. And despite not...
I do like the idea of not having a second skill bar that comes in every single time, or a third skill bar that comes in every single time you transform. That's cool too.
Feeling at first, I quickly got a lot better once I started utilizing my crazy amounts of evasion correctly. And in addition to all that, I just felt really cool flipping and jumping and twirling all around, and actually was able to do some crazy fun stuff with a little bit of practice. My favorite go-to for a group of enemies quickly became dodge rolling to activate count drops and buff myself, vaulting back in, which did more damage while evading and also restored endurance, and dodge rolling again and repeating that process until I couldn't anymore. It probably isn't the highest DPS you can do with a correct...
Pulling big groups feels so good in this game too. Like, just watching this video makes me want to play more Guild Wars 2. Dude, I swear it's just... Man, it's astounding how different all of the classes can play and how they all can feel this really specific kind of way. I think that thieves are supposed to feel spongy. I think it's a very cool way to bring them into this world. You know, Daredevil, the name of the class, literally is the idea of being a daredevil, putting yourself in danger, knowing that you could get hurt, not caring, you know, trying to think it through in the moment and jumping back and forth between things. It feels really cool to look at all these different classes, man. I'm also always really interested in these people who have played this game so much but still find content to go back and do over and over and over again. I know he's getting achievements and things, but it's something to for sure note the idea of, what do I want to do with this new character? Where am I going to take them first?
But it was amazing fun, so that's what matters. Plus, throwing out disturbing amounts of crowd control by using Fist Flurry into Palm Strike, and being able to absolutely spam Debilitating Arc into Helmet Breaker, just mince up Defiance bars in no time, and it was absolutely awesome and hilarious.
Like Led Zeppelin.
I don't think I've played a single build that can just spam out so much CC like this. I know there's probably some better tuned ones that can out there, but this was just crazy for me. Over the course of the first weekend of July, I was able to finish up all the Verdant Brink achievements at long last, which looks beautiful in my hero pack. Daredevil was an absolute blast, and I look forward to finding a fully tuned build for it in the future. The build I managed to cobble together was Acrobatics, Trickery, and Daredevil in a 2-3-2, 1-1-2, and 2-1-3 order, respectively. The worst and most unfortunate part that I got into with Daredevil was something that would haunt me the rest of the month: the Heart of Thorns adventures. I thought Verdant Brink's Tendril Tortures was bad, but little did I know the worst was yet ahead in the Tangled Depths. But before we get to that, we have Auric Basin and the Spectre gameplay to cover. Headed now to the Golden City of Tarir is where my Spectre got a chance to shine. I was interested in
so he's switching between all the specs.
And even better, the more I looked, the more excited I got. First of all, it was condition-based, and over the last few months, I've really been having fun with condition-based builds, because it's been so dang long since I really played Any. All of my go-to builds have been power builds. But not only was it condition-based, but also like last month's Scrapper.
I do not understand Condi builds still to this day. I get the idea that you're doing condition damage, so you must be putting out a lot of Condis on people, but I still don't understand really what that means, like how that changes from power in the way that it's going to play completely. Is it more, I'm assuming it's more DOT or more just using the Condis against them? I have no idea.
Spectre's unique skills were wells, and I had a good amount of fun with Scrapper last month, and these wells came with shadow steps built into it, which was a really cool addition. I set up a Condi-focused
shadow steps,
build,
like little teleports,
grabbed a scepter, and hit the viney trails. Now, I ran Scepter for all the Torment and other conditions, with Pistol offhand
damn
mostly
snipers with those lines, dude.
for additional crowd control and staying at a range when possible. While initially it was an odd idea, being a magical casting thief with a Scepter, I had loads of fun with this build. Scepter skills felt and looked really good.
Guild Wars 2 really does have a lot of that World of Warcraft classic kind of feeling built into it. And what I mean by that is that every time I play classic, I always think to myself, I feel like I'm playing a video game. I feel like I'm playing a game from the PS1, PS2, Nintendo 64 era in that area. The graphics look a little bit better. The gameplay is a little bit better and more polished. But besides that, like, you're going around and exploring. You have all these things that you're trying to work to. There is no really quick ascension to the max level. You're sort of working your way through the game chronologically and trying to find your way through it and find all these pathways and learn all these tips and tricks along the way. And Guild Wars 2 has that thing baked into it by the way that all content is evergreen, the way you have to work your way through the content in order to get unlocks. All of those things feel really, really good. It does keep out new players and overwhelms people a lot, but as with anything else, the important thing to remember whenever you're playing a game like this is that you are taking your time because you're enjoying the game. There is nothing to rush to. If you pay to get through content, then you're just paying to not play the game that you've already paid money for. So you should take your time and enjoy what you're doing. And I think that a lot of people sort of miss that whenever they're playing an MMO, especially, is that the game starts the second that you log in. It doesn't start at some far off moment in the future. You're not going to get there any faster by rushing through everything. You're not going to put 1,000 hours into a game by only putting 50 hours into a game. You get there honestly by playing it and by experiencing it and by having all these little stories about it as you go along. I think that's one of the biggest things that people have forgotten in this nowadays time of the algorithm being the thing that controls us into thinking everything that we think. We're trying to get likes, we're trying to get clicks, we're trying to do all of those things, and we think that the best way to do that and the quickest way to do that is to become a master of something as quickly as possible. But you can't become a master of something immediately. It takes a decade of your life in order to do, and you come by it honestly. And I really think that Guild Wars 2 just captures that of slowing you down and saying, hey man, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take you at least 30, 40 hours to get through all the story in the first place, the first core game. It's going to take you another 30 or 40 to get through Heart of Thorns, and each of the Living World seasons are going to be long as well. You can do dungeons, you can do raids, you can do strikes, you can do fractals along the way to speed that up. You can hang out in all these events, but really, I think Guild Wars 2 wants you to slow down and experience it and play it and enjoy it, and that's what makes you build a bond with these games.
Good to me. Although, ArenaNet, can we do something about these tooltips? I mean, good lord, how am I supposed to read these tooltips on the fly?
Yeah.
Well of Bounty, Sorrow, and Tears all felt great as well. And the elite skill Shadowfall giving me the ability to suck in enemies to my well shenanigans was the perfect complement to the double damaging wells. Siphon was awesome because I never had to try and think about what it was I just stole and how I should use it. I could just hit it every time it was off cooldown, and that was it, taking one less thing to think about out of play. Shadow Shroud was pretty cool too, and while it did still do good damage,
like the mage version,
I was missing out on the massive team support that Spectre could bring to a small group scenario. I ended up just putzing around here most of the week, and even doing some Return to Living World 3 content, because most of my Auric Basin stuff I had left was just collectible farming and some more painful adventures. So I filled the time in with some events, had some fun, quests? Did plenty of Octovines and some Living World 3 stuff.
Octovines are good.
My final Spectre build was Deadly Arts, Trickery, and Spectre in a 3-1-1, 3-3-2, and 3-1-1 format respectively. Honestly, one of the biggest takeaways of Spectre for me was that I'll probably switch my Thief over to run it primarily and bring her along for when I run World versus World Havoc duos or small squads. Because if you can get good with a good Spectre build, I feel like it brings so much.
That is one problem that I've ran into a lot while playing Guild Wars 2, is that because I'm so new to the game still and because I'm still working my way through, I'm really not a part of these teams or these groups of people that are doing things like this that allow me to sort of have these characters that are necessary for the situation. Like, oh, I know that on Wednesdays we do this thing and I need to be there for that, and we only have this many people who are doing that, so it's a good thing for me to come with this build that's going to support all of them in this kind of way. Like, I don't have anything like that because I'm not, really there yet as far as being able to plan the content around, where or what I know to do and all that. Like, I just don't have the knowledge of it yet. So, it makes sense for me to just do DPS, because whenever there's a spot available for a DPS, I just pop in and do
much additional support to the table for two coordinated people working together. Even still, unlike some other support stuff like the Centaur from Revenant, Spectre stood on its own just great, and I had a blast with it in Auric Basin. Unlike Verdant Brink, I wasn't able to finish all of the achievements as I still need to run Octovine a lot. But
48 more
with
times.
my week in Auric Basin finished, it was time to delve into the Tangled depths with my old friend, the Deadeye. I saved a build I was most familiar with for this section because I knew there were some pretty dense achievement runs left here, and Tangled Depths
I want to see what Deadeye's like.
Not the most popular or liked map the last time I was here, outside of semi-professional wall watching. So I wanted to be able to hold my own. Big iron on my hip, I descended down and just started blasting. Event after event taken down, and honestly, I started to impress myself even with some champion level enemy solo efforts. While I was familiar with the Deadeye mechanics at a glance, I definitely had some perfecting and translating to do. Most of my experience is from 2-year-plus-old World versus World techniques that are still rattling around.
That's why I want Deadeye's for World versus World.
So it took some experimentation to hone in. And I gotta say, I actually very much enjoy the gameplay loop in PvE, more of marking a target, building up 5 malice, and then doing a stealth sniper shot to drain their hit points faster than I've been draining zeros lately, which is very fast. Not to mention, there's absolutely satisfaction for me in slow walking towards an enemy, just dumping rounds down range with cool sound effects. It's the closest we've gotten to the commando profession, which hopefully we'll get the next expansion pack after Janthier Wilds. My stealing utilization of what I stole really flourished here as well with Deadeye, and I felt like I was firing on all cylinders by this point in the month. Thief was starting to feel great. Now, the extremely unfortunate aspect of where I chose to play Deadeye is a ton of enemies here have Reflect, and I kept killing myself all the time. I mean, on some champions, I ended up on Dagger, way more than I was actually using the Deadeye rifle.
I think Reflect is such a frustrating mechanic in most games. It's the same way in Maple Story, where anytime an enemy has Reflect, you die once to it, and then you remember, and every single time you're just waiting for the Reflect queue, and that becomes the most challenging part of the game, is just remembering to stop dumping DPS whenever Reflect happens. I tend to not like mechanics that tell you to just sit there and wait, because I think that that's not very interactive, and it doesn't really add to the feeling of fighting this enemy, because if they can do this Reflect thing, it's like, why don't you just do this all of the time? If you have the ability to reflect all damage, this magical thing, then why wouldn't you just always do that? Also, why can't I do it? Oh, because it's broken. That's why. Sorry, little rant there.
But it also surprised me how good Dagger felt on Deadeye. Also, Tangled Depths, in addition to being the most confusing map I've ever tried to navigate in this game, brought me face to face with one of my biggest pet peeves in Guild Wars 2.
Okay, let's hear it.
The amount of progression breaking bugs that still linger in old content drives me insane. Please, ArenaNet, I'm begging.
I got stuck multiple times in Tangled Depths and had to unstuck myself or whatever the command is to get out of it. I noticed that a lot too, that there's a lot of places where you can just sort of like get trapped if you're not paying enough attention.
How many of these swimsuits do we have to buy before you can hire a team of like 2 or 3 to just go back through the last 12 years of content and bug fix? I mean, I'm not a coder by any means. I'm a plumber, but goodness gracious, it can't be that bad, can it?
It would probably be like removing certain things and making things more streamlined. Like I would say there's probably catches that just end up happening that need to not happen, and that's just something in the code that people are unable to find at this point, or they just don't care about the content anymore because it's not actively making the money. Although they're still selling the expansion, so that's definitely not it. I don't know.
Seriously, I got hung up on this dang grub protection event dozens of times. I kept having to hop around servers to find an event chain that actually worked.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to do most of the chain like 8 different times because I would miss one event or the final event
really cool. That looks rad.
Before the chalk garant spawned, and the chalk garant spawning auto ends all the lane-based quests. I wanted to chew on a brick. It was so frustrating. My build was Shadow Arts, Trickery, and Deadeye in a 2-3-2, 3-1-2, and 1-1-2 format. Over the course of the week, I was able to power through all but 2 achievements here for Tangled Depths. With all the lane achievements I had left and how long the lane quests take, this was certainly the most grindy of all the weeks thus far, but there was one more yet to come, and it would be the most disappointing of all. For Core Thief, I took to Dragon's Stand to take the fight to Mordremoth over and over and over again, and finish up the last 7 achievements I had left here.
Oh, that's really interesting.
But there was nobody here.
Core tends to not be a thing that people do.
You can't start lanes without at least 5 people in each one, which is 15 people total. And I needed stuff from every lane, so I just gave up.
Yeah.
I abandoned the Heart of Thorns portion of the challenge since Festival of the Four Winds came out.
There are dead zones. There are things that, like, people love to talk about this in Guild Wars 2 where they go, everything feels so alive. There's tons of people. I agree with you. There are tons of people, but not everywhere. There are definitely dead zones where people just go, that content doesn't matter to me. I've already gotten what I need from these areas. I, don't want to do that because it's really frustrating. This thing, that thing, whatever. That happens still. There are still totally places that feel
around
dead.
This time. And I had planned on coming back during the weekend for Dragon's Stand when hopefully more people were on, but sadly real life got in the way of most of my last week of July I saved for Core Thief, and it just never happened, unfortunately. So Mordremoth went undefeated. I got a good amount of Core Thief gameplay in still though. I was doing a lot of boss blitz with poisons primarily, and I very much enjoyed it. Dagger has always been a fun combo for me on Thief. I enjoy the stealth backstab.
I feel like that's the true Thief experience.
I didn't play around with poisons much, so that was enjoyable. I played around with Dagger Pistol a little bit, and a little bit of Sword Dagger, and some non-Daredevil staff. It's only in writing and recording this video that I realized I completely forgot that Thief got access to the axe a while ago as part of the expanded weapon masteries, so yeah, I really missed out on that during this month, which is a huge oversight on my part. But overall, the old Core Thief still felt pretty good.
Pretty cool. Core Thief does play really good.
The other 3 elite specs.
I played it like level 40. I will say
by this point, my stealing was absolutely on point, however. My core build was Deadly Arts, Critical Strikes, and Trickery in a 3-1-1, 3-1-1, and 3-1-3 format. Now, I didn't fully complete my Heart of Thorns achievements this month, so I fell a bit short there, but where I didn't fall short is learning how to play the class.
So many. How can you feel like you fell short?
Blast while doing it. Compared to the Revenant and Engineer, the fun I had on all of these builds was honestly pretty dang equal. I can't even really call a winner here. That's how close it was for me. I had a blast, and this really made me feel confident in my Thief abilities. I mean,
this guy's trying to master the game.
Massive group pulls and even a couple.
What you're watching here is the evolution of a guy who is one day going to be huge in the Guild Wars 2 community.
Champion solos with my own builds. I can't imagine what an actual optimized, tuned, and built with a brain build is going to be able to do the next time I hop on to play Thief. I can officially say Thief feels like a class I can actually be good at and understand for the first time since probably 2013. Next month, I've definitely got to up the ante as far as the challenge, but until then, you should click this video right here to see how last month's awesome.
Very cool, dude. It's very exciting to see this kind of content, and especially because Thief is probably the next class that I'm going to end up playing whenever I get around to it. I might go into Path of Fire with Thief. That might be the thing that I try to end up doing, although it might be really frustrating to skip to another expansion. But to unlock all of my mounts and everything, that could be a really good time. So I'll look into this for sure, and Thief looks really, really good. I'll see you guys on the next one. I've been fighting a panic attack for the past 10 minutes or so. So I'll see you guys on the next one. Everyone be safe out there. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And see you later, guys. Bye.